to another episode of the Monitor Keeping Podcast. We started off with Kai's cat in the background already, so she's starting us off early. We're finally getting back to it. Things have been a little busy for sure, but we'll get into the reasons why and some other conversations. So first off, Kai, how you been? How you doing?
Oh man, I've been so busy. I've been extremely swamped with orders and the monitor stuff, breeding things. I'm basically trying to do a couple things a little bit differently, which we'll get into a little bit more when we get into that part of the podcast. Other than that, man, just dealing with the normal stuff here. I got Gravid monitors right now and other monitors that getting into the things, getting into the whole motion of breeding and stuff like that. New monitors that were recently imported that I recently got. And really, just a little bit of everything, acclimating, breeding, making sure animals don't kill each other. Just quite the normal. The last podcast I had, which was roughly about a month and a half ago or something like that, I hatched out a coli, and then that guest, Aubrey, hatched out his. And so we've just kind of been, living in the excitement, just because it's as far as how we work together, which will be another topic we'll have later on this podcast as well. Just bouncing ideas back and forth. Now it's ideas about, babies and then the genetics and the color schemes that we have, and then how to work forward from there. What about you, man?
Shoot.
Get started where you're at right now. Get started on where you're at right now.
All right. So it might sound a little different. Hopefully the echo's not too bad, but I'm down in this, what we call the basement here at my house. Finally getting moved in here. We've hit some snags, but all in all, it actually looks like things are going to work out better than initially thought. We got into a lower interest rate on the house, which means less money overall. But it's taken almost like 2 months longer than we wanted to get this thing done. There's a lot of reasons why it got kind of interesting, because we're buying a house from a family trust, and we're not really doing it with a realtor. So, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of things to figure out how to do correctly. And, just moving money around, because we do have money actually tied up in this house, even though we didn't own it. But that's also the money that we had to use as a down payment to get into the house. So the way that you're like buying the house, but that money gets promised back in to the deal and everything. So, and then we had to switch mortgage companies at one point. So Friday, finally going to be official on Friday. And this is part of, where I'm going to be setting up shop and condensing down into. You guys the listeners can't see it, but Kai and our guests can see it. And I kind of gave them a little tour before we started. So there's a good amount of room, but I had like two warehouse spots full, so I'm still condensing down a little bit. So it's going to get interesting, but it's just another stepping stone. Eventually there will be more space and more stuff built. But on top of the house stuff, man, there was some, I don't know how far into things I should go. Some personal, like family stuff that we had to deal with, still dealing with. My father-in-law had to have emergency surgery. So we don't know, but we're pretty sure he's lost the use of his legs because of a cancerous tumor on his spine that they did get removed. But it was already eating through the discs on his spine. So, and it's setting up kind of full-time care for that, because, the house that we're in, it's kind of like an older style, I think they call them tri-level houses. So there are stairs down into certain rooms and whatnot. And without the use of legs, and with this house, I think it was built originally in the 1960s. So it's not exactly accessible friendly, and there's not a lot you can do or change because of the way it was built. So we got a lot of that to figure out here soon. Some other issues going on that I won't get into, but everything as of today, it seems like everything is working out and everything's falling in place, and it's a lot of motivation to get this done because I got to have all the animals in here in like 2 weeks. So
yeah, it's a lot of
U-Haul. Yeah,
it's a lot,
renting
man.
U-Haul, and it's going to be a lot of moving stuff over and setting it up. And there's little problems that I'm not even sure that the electrical will really handle all the stuff I have to plug in. So fortunately, this whole week we're in like the upper 80s, low 90s. Yeah. And we'll get into temps today, but in my experience, that's good enough to let stuff ride for a little bit. That's not thriving to any degree for a long-term purpose, but like I'm almost certain Ackies could probably go through the entire summer at an ambient of 85, 90 degrees in the house somewhere or in the garage and work with it. But, of course, I'm going to be working feverishly to get them all set up and whatnot. It's just nice to know that I can do that. Some of the more temp-sensitive animals, they're going to get taken care of first, where the Ackies, possibly the sand monitors and the like the Australian pythons, like the breadlie, those things are so rock-solid tanks. I've kind of let them ride at ambient temperatures in the warehouse before at these same temperatures, so I'm not really afraid of that. And it's going to give me a little wiggle room. Plus, they're going to be here, so I don't have to drive anywhere to check on anything or do it remotely by video. I can just now run downstairs and check on everything. So it's been busy. It's been crazy. Things have been falling into place. Oh, and on top of that, my wife is in her third trimester now, so everything's going good. We had some baby showers and whatnot to do, so I had to take time away from what I wanted to do. I'm just kidding. I'm down here in the basement, so I can say this stuff, and she's not going to hear it. But no, we've been having a lot of fun, a lot of family flying in and whatnot, and seeing them, and then of course Mother's Day. So it has been incredibly busy, but and it's starting to get hotter now too, which is crazy. But yeah, man, that's what's been going on here. Oh, other than that, not a lot going on as far as the monitors. My last clutch of sand monitor eggs that I was talking about in the last episode, all infertile, which is kind of a kick in the gut, but I expect a few other clutches from the monitors specifically. I think the Kims are going to go for another round. I sent a picture to Kai of 2 proven females that appeared locked up. So we'll see what's going on with that, because I know for a fact that like this isn't an accident or anything as far as the sexes of them. I've gotten and hatched clutches from both of these females, and they're very distinctive from the male. It's not like there's a mix-up of any sort. So
this is dominance locking.
It could totally be, but if something popped out from that, man, I would lose my mind. Like, wait a second. But so there hasn't been production from the animals like there was the last few years. But for everything going on, I'm actually really, really thankful that I'm not going to have a bunch of mouths to feed.
Well, I guess that that'll be a good for this episode too, because you talked about instead of just doing the light cooling, you're going to go into doing a full blown cooling season, so that way you get better fertility the next season, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you mentioned something like that, right?
Well, we'll get into that more, and then but on the other hand, I know this is a monitor keeping podcast, but I did get some snake eggs from some first time species for me. That's pretty cool. One is a local project that I picked up off the road. That turned out to be a gravid female and laid some pretty cool babies, and it's kind of proven out if that's going to happen some more. So because I was able to raise up one of those males, breed it back to the mom, and we'll see what that turns out. I'm really excited about that thing. So that's what's been going on here. So.
Okay, to introduce our guest, we have Will. Your last name is McClure. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, McClure. That's good.
All right, cool, man. Man, we're glad to have you on. Thanks for being patient with us and everything like that. While Alan gets set up in his new basement. Just to start off, man, I know I've talked to you quite a bit, and I've seen some of your YouTube stuff and things like that, and we've kind of been friends online for I think the last year or two. Tell the world what you're about, man, and what you do and things like that. What got you into reptiles or monitors?
Yeah, man. Special thanks to Alan and Kai first off for having me on the podcast. I've been a long time fan. I actually used to come into work early when I was like 17 and hide an AirPod underneath my headset just to listen to the podcast. So that's like,
shit, wait. So
I
wait,
never.
you're like 20 years old right now?
I'm 19.
Oh dang,
Yeah.
you look a little bit older, bro.
That's what everyone says, man.
Yeah.
I didn't get caught though, so that's good. But
Wait. You got to tell me what kind of headset. What were you supposed to be doing where you had this headset
Okay,
buried
listen.
under?
So I came in for the early shift, right? So I came in at like 6 a.m. because I was doing school online at that point because of COVID. So I was supposed to be just watching the self checkouts, like monitoring everything because I worked at a grocery store. But there was not really anyone in the store, so I would keep it on until about 9 o'clock. When people would start coming in, then you guys would finish. Then I just go back to doing my job, you know.
Oh, right.
I was committed, man. Committed to the grind.
Yeah, man.
Good stuff.
But yeah, like they said, my name is Will McClure. I'm from Maryland. You can find me online on Instagram at Mr. Will Exotic, on YouTube at Will Exotic. I'm just a monitor lizard and reptile enthusiast. I've been keeping and been obsessed with reptiles ever since I can remember. I've been keeping them since I was probably like 6 or 7. You know, your basic anoles, your toads, stuff you'd find outside. What really got me into monitors was I was reading a book about dinosaurs and birds and that kind of stuff when I was young, and I saw a big gould eye, a big gould eye that was depicted. And I saw that and I was like, that's what I want, right? Because I was a big dinosaur kid. So I saw that and I was like, this is the closest thing. So that's how I kind of got into it. And then it just kind of grew and grew to where I am now. It's mainly just keep monitors.
Nice, man. Well, dang, I didn't realize you were that young, bro. When I was talking yesterday, man. I thought you were kind of like maybe in your later 20s or even in your 30s. But
that's what people say.
Yeah. I mean, to admit to, a lot of people. I mean, I know there's a lot of young, internet sensations and stuff like that. But to do kind of what you're doing in the like that mangrove monitor YouTube that you made, right? That one was pretty good. Like
Thanks, man.
I felt like that was really professional, and it got down a lot of information on things, especially like the stuff that most people don't really acknowledge about mangroves, you know. So that was I to be honest, man, I don't ever watch YouTubes that often, you know, and for me to sit through the whole thing and listen to it all, it was pretty good.
It means a lot, man. Yeah. I try and bring some good information. Just obviously I'm super passionate about monitors, so I try and bring as much informational content, but still in a way that's easily digestible to people entertainment wise. Because obviously with the TikTok and everything, everyone just wants to scroll. But
right.
Yeah, man.
It's kind of leaving it's more of like a quick sensation rather than like an educational, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where I find myself like, dang, I like TikTok because it's, it's quick fun, right? But as far as like, and they get messages across. People, I learn stuff from TikTok all the time, but then you can scroll quickly to the next thing. Where YouTube, it's like you're there to learn about something often. Like if I, let's say, wanted to plumb my sink something, you'll learn it on YouTube. You know what I mean? Something like that, right?
Facts.
But yeah, man, to get to where we are today for this podcast, I really thought it was a great idea. It all started with a Facebook post from another gentleman. I think he's from the UK, and basically asking about how other people cool their monitors down, whether it's by heat or by food or humidity and things like that. And I basically offered Will, because he said that he was following the post. That post didn't really go very far as people throwing in information and stuff like that. So, I basically volunteered, hey, Will, if you feel like you need help or you want some guidelines on this, I can definitely help you out, And so that's why we're here today. I felt like it was not just the conversation that me and Will can have, but I guarantee that thousands of other monitor keepers that may listen to this will at least, catch the drift on what we're doing. It's nothing new. It's nothing new to the whole reptile world because, North American breeders and things like that. He'll be back. North American breeders and stuff like that have already been doing this for tortoises and turtles and snakes and stuff like that. They'll cool down a whole rack. And in a sense, Will, it's monitors. It's not exactly like the brumation and the hibernation that people are doing with the snakes and turtles, where they go under and they're not fed at all for months, right? Because if you fed a snake like that, it'll likely have rotten food in its stomach, you know?
Mm-hmm.
For the monitors, I want to be clear with this. When people try to do this, they're still eating, but only maintenance food, maintenance feeding, not so much as going completely empty. You know what I mean? So I don't want you to think like, oh, we're going to be cooling them down and they're, you know, they're done, right? It's it's going to be a thing where you're paying attention to them and things like that. So to start off, you know, I really had trouble figuring this out myself because, you know, contrary to what we're talking about now, a lot of people have always kept monitors, like especially Indonesian ones, hot and humid all year round, right? All year round, where, you know, people say, hey, it never gets below 70. The humidity is always high. And, you know, if you look at Google weather and things like that, you know, the temperatures are always quite high, which is true in a sense, you know, which is true in a sense. So, you know, when you have those contradicting things and people like, there's not to say stuck in their ways, but that's that's how they learned, you know, that's how they gathered information, and no one's to blame. It's really just, you know, you're looking at Google weather or Google Maps weather or stuff like that. And you look up Solomon Island and it's quite warm, and raining and stuff like that. But you don't really grasp the microclimates that the monitors deal with.
For sure.
And so that's where we're going to get into here. For myself, I used to keep them hot and humid and basically running like at 100 miles an hour all year round. And in a sense, it'll work a little bit, but I find when I cool them down and I actually do things with them that are quite different than the norm, I get the best results. Now, going back to what I was saying earlier, you know, I had to kind of fight against the grain with everybody saying, hey, you know, that's you shouldn't do that. You know, you don't do that, or basically don't even try it because, you know, these monitors are kept really hot. So figure out a different way to get them to cycle, right? And when even like people that used to teach me before, they're like, the hardest thing to breed mangroves and the Indicus complex, which is one of the hardest mangrove species to breed. Not just mangroves and Indicus itself, but the whole complex is quite difficult. You know, like tricolors and Dorianus have been proven almost impossible to breed. You know, not very much success there. Peach throats, I think it's still Mike's monitors that are reigning supreme. And he did that decades ago almost, right? And so that's what, you know, triggered me, and that's why I like the Indicus stuff, because, you know, they're quite difficult. They're more of like a mind-numbing thing. Yeah, it's really tricky, right? And I essentially went with how another gentleman named Dave Urbanowicz, and he breeds white throats, right? And he's like, well, man, you know, the weather out there, when you're looking at Google, that's going to tell you one thing, but if you were to ask Indonesian people themselves, you know, they have a wet season and then they have a dry season. It's not just wet and humid and sunny all day, all year round, you know. And so what I learned is in the time of our summer, May, June, July, that's their dry season. And when it's dry season, there's no rain clouds. And so what happens is all the heat and humidity escapes so fast, and that's when they get the coldest nights of the year. And so, you know, going into depth with that, I utilized that and applied that to my enclosures. Now, I was keeping Kimberleys and I was keeping other stuff too, and I kind of put them through all the same things, and I got great results from it. So dwarf monitors, the harder to breed dwarf monitors that are in those Indonesian islands like Offenburgi and chimarensis and similis and whatever else that's out there that prove quite hard to produce, have been doing pretty well with that alone. It's just kind of cooling them down. Now, it's still tricky to some people where they have to understand how to do it. And that gentleman had a list of what you do, and I do all of them. I do the food triggers, the humidity lowering, the photo period going from 14, 16 hours a day to 8 to 10 hours a day, the temperatures going lower, and I can get down to the very details, like the food is when you're normally feeding every 4-5 days out of the week, right? And you're feeding quite often. I then decrease it back and go from 4-5 times a week to then 2 to 3 times, and then to only 1 time a week. And this is a stretch for about 2 to 3 months. You can go as long as 4 or 5 months, okay? And that's where I find that it's that alone isn't enough for me. So I then also lower the temperature, because if they're also, you got to think about it like this: if they're not eating a ton, there's no need to have a ton of heat making them digest so fast.
For sure.
Okay, so whatever temperatures, let's say you're using 140 surface temperatures, right? I then dial it back down slowly to then get to about 100 degrees surface temperatures. It'll be roughly maybe 80s and high 70s and maybe even low 90s right by the basking area, but they can't get extremely hot where they can metabolize so fast. So not only does the food decrease, and then the temperature is decreased, okay? Now, when you're doing that, also the humidity goes down. So let's say if you're at 70-80% humidity, I take it down to about 40-50% humidity, okay? And then your pockets will be even lower in different areas, like 30 and things like that. So don't be scared to go low, all right? And it'll, don't also put them into shock by just going really hot and then the next day extremely cold. You want to go down. If, let's say, you're doing a 3-month period, by the first month, the middle of the first month, you've gone down slowly. By the second and third month, you've then reached your lowest points. Okay, so you kind of you're still with me, right?
I got you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, it's because it's quite a bit when you're doing them all. No, you know what I mean? And so now then your photo.
I'm still trying to.
And your
off for a second.
your photo period too. Same thing. There's no real need to have a full-on day where you're having 14, 16 hours of basking, and then you take it down to then 12 hours and 10 hours, and then it goes down to like about 8 hours, and then that's my lowest point, is roughly about 7 or 8 hours of them getting the ability to bask, still metabolize a little bit, and then you're going to feed maybe once a week to just maintenance feed. They're going to get so lean. All right. So lean. Now, the reason why I get them so lean, and obviously I'm trying to trigger them, but when it's a necessity to visually see that they're going through the reproductive cycle, an animal comparable when it's fat and then versus when it's skinny, it's so much easier to tell when they're cycling, when they're leaner. And so also at the same time, you then, let's say if you've done all this for 3 months, right? And then let's say it's March, and then March, April, May, June. So let's say at the end of May, beginning of June, you then add the quail chicks and eggs and, day-old chicks or mice or whatever you're feeding, right? Whatever you're feeding has then changed. It's gone back to the normal 4 or 5 times a week. And then those calorie bombs that they need, essentially the ratio of calcium, the ratio of fat, like the yolk part of the chick, and then the protein that comes from all that is essentially what they need. Okay, it's not just fat.
So that's what triggers them to go into vitellogenesis, is the mixture of all of those different things at the end of the cooling?
Yeah, those 3 things. And it's it's taking fat, right, Alan? It's taking fat, and then you're taking those and turning those into ovum, and you know that's where the follicles build up and stuff like that. Okay.
So I do have one question, kind of going back to what you were saying. So you said you've implemented this stuff with like species that are like tropical Indonesian stuff, as well as like semi-arid African, as well as you said Australian stuff too, right?
Right. Now the Australian stuff I did with just the Kimberleys, but if let's say your fertility isn't so great, your female's shooting duds, then it might be a thing where you offer that. And in Australia as well, there are some places that get down very cold.
Yeah,
there are some places that snow, you know, in Australia. So not to say that monitors are there, it's just the temperatures when you think of Australia, it's not always hot and blistering, you know.
I was thinking like, so those microhabitus species, like so say we'll take a Kimberley rock or a Pilbar or something like that, right?
Right.
So like obviously in their microhabitat they're getting more humidity, correct? Than they are outside. So how would you kind of go about if you wanted to use humidity as a trigger or temperature as a trigger where it'll be cooler inside their rock crevice? Because I'm coming at this from like, so I keep Pilbarensis, right? And so trying to perhaps implement some type of cooling, what do you think would be the best way to go about that in terms of making a cooler, drier habitat, even though they mostly live in a microhabitat and their outside humidity is already pretty low? You know what I mean? You kind of
right. So if that's the case, then you might just do the photo period, the temperature, and then food.
Okay.
Go low on those. Basically, it's, you know, me and Alan joke around. It's kind of like us neglecting them. We're not. It's just, you know, we're not giving them full on food every day. We're not making them really fat. So if you give yourself
neglect.
Measured neglect. So, you know, it when people think like, dang, you don't feed a whole lot during 4 or 5 months of the year. Yeah. You know, I'm basically, there's no reason for me to. They're not breeding, and I don't want them to produce all year round. You know what I mean? I want them to give me a couple clutches, something like that that's safe. I don't want to keep having them go back to back to back to back, because then it's rough on the female, you know. So give it a try. Some people just do one thing. Some people, bro, they don't do a thing at all. They just don't fight the winter. They let the cages kind of go down. They don't feed a whole lot, you know. But some people like me, I'm trying to test this on my own animals. So what I'll do is, instead of just doing it in the wintertime, I'll also do it in spring, and then I'll do it in summertime. And because I have so many different pairs, I'm trying new different things with each of them, and seeing kind of which one works best. And right now, it's just finishing spring, and what I've been doing is I just cut out most of my lamps, and they've been basically locking, breeding, doing a whole bunch. I have a gravid female right now from utilizing this method, and essentially I have typically 3 floodlights, right? I'm only using 1 now. I'm only currently using 1, and it's on the norm. It's not regular. It's you know, not enough basking, and you know, it's just 1 bulb where they should have, you know, coverage of the whole lizard, right? Those are all the regular normalcies that we recommend for people. But when it comes to the breeding and I'm trying different things that aren't normal, I want to stress this out, where it's a thing that we're just trying it. We're trying to see if I can get the colder temperatures to basically have the follicles build up more, the animals come out a little bit more, and quite frankly, to say the truth, I feel like I was keeping them too hot, because now that I've lowered it, they're out more. This male, he's so much less like hectic, you know. He's letting me pet him. He's coming out, and he has a normal routine rather than coming out quickly to bask and then disappearing, you know, which is great, because then he's active more. He does a lot more. He essentially is out for me to visually see him being more rewarding, you know. And so it's a thing where now this animal has changed so much then I feel like, dang, I've been keeping you too hot, I think, you know?
Yeah.
And he comes out whenever the lights go on, and he'll bask for a little bit, and then he goes and does his thing, and then he'll come back to basking. Instead of him, I felt like I was keeping him so hot that he wasn't doing a thing, you know? Now, why I started doing this is because, bro, in the last 2 years or whatnot, I've gotten 30 or 40 coli clutches,
Wow.
right? Like I'm talking, but none of them were fertile. Maybe last year, 2021, I hatched out one egg. That baby died in like 4 months. And then this year, I hatched out one more, you know? I've gotten a ton of clutches, I swear, like easily 20 to 30 clutches within 2020, 2021, and 2022. And so many of them were infertile. The females are great. They just doing their thing. But I had to figure out why all the breeding, but no good eggs, right?
Yeah.
And that's the truth here, you know? So I had to figure out, okay, his log is up high. His log is where his favorite log is where it's at. It's like 80, 90 degrees. So I took it and I moved it to the very coldest part of the cage. So he has to be around 70 degrees now, you know?
So this is more for the male then. Like this cooling is for the female as well as the male's fertility?
As
You
the
think it
male's
affects
fertility, too.
Okay. I didn't expect that.
And as Alan, as a snake breeder, he'll tell you himself that a lot of people cool down their colubrids and ball pythons and other snakes, you know, to get good fertility out of the male and female, you know.
Okay. I didn't expect that. I did not expect the males to have that big of an impact.
You still do that quite a bit with some of your pythons and other snakes?
Yeah. So I'm feeling that they adjust to wherever you're at to a certain degree, but there's still the temperature fluctuation. So, like the gopher snakes, those are snakes that are usually you have to cool them down to get any kind of reproductive success out of them. Same thing with bredli are well known for that. Like you gotta cool them down into. Some guys have trouble getting them cool enough below like 60 degrees, where other keepers are putting them into like the upper 30s. I've even heard to 40 degrees.
Yeah, we're talking cold.
Yeah. And I haven't taken monitors that low, but I have taken monitors into the lower 60s to try to accomplish the same thing. Now, all the years before this, I've had plenty of success with stuff. This year's a little off, so I can't say this year with the changes and everything that's going on. But it was the intent initially to drop everything to a certain degree, and then sometime in the winter I actually ended up bumping a lot of temperatures up. So there's a few different reasons for that. I've gone through it in some of the other podcasts, but some of it was I'm learning that a mixture of species, having all the snakes and monitors in the same area, can be a little hectic with trying to get the temperatures right for everybody and who's doing what on what schedule. Because some things are like winter breeders for the snakes, some things are spring breeders. So, you know, I'm still figuring out some of the key components for where I'm keeping things, and now I'm changing that all up by moving things a little bit. But there is, I've had some good success with cooling down different animals in the past. And it's something I'm going to try it again. Like I probably have a lot more to add next year once I have the animals in new setups here. But as far as like the sand monitors, I've cooled the sand monitors. Now, what was interesting was that the female, she was resistant to it. She wanted to be under the basking lamp that I still had. And she wouldn't move the entire day. She'd just sit under the basking lamp, where the male went down for a couple months. And every opportunity, she would feed as much as she could, because I was still feeding her if she wanted to be under the basking lamp like that. She'd come running out of the cage for food. You know, I would feed her up, but now I'm trying to do, it seemed like I was trying to do two different things in the same cage, where I was trying to keep it warm enough for her to digest this food, because obviously she wanted it. And for a while, it's like she was not gaining any weight, and I was just putting food into her. but the male, he was trying to go down at the same time in the same cage. So I'm wondering if that has something to do with the infertility, because maybe in the future what I need to realize is, or what I need to adopt is, even if it's a small like holding cage, if it allows him to go down to a temperature where he wants, especially if the female in this situation is doing the same thing, where she wants to, for whatever reason, feed up and put on some weight, get some reserves in her body, and the male wants to go down, then maybe I need 2 different cages, because even in an 8 by 6 type of walk-in cage, it's still not enough space to accomplish both of their needs at once. So that was one thing that I kind of saw going on, and so it's making me think, especially with this last infertile clutch. But definitely easier to do with the smaller monitors than it is with some of the larger monitors. And indicats aren't small like everything Kai keeps. They're not huge. They're not water monitors, but at the same time, they're not small. So these are some of the little. What we get to thinking is like, okay, I tried this, I saw this, and then we'll talk about it, or we'll talk with other people about it and share this information. As far as, okay, what did you see here? What did you do here? And so that's something I'm gonna in the back of my mind is, I was seeing 2 different attitudes out of 2 monitors in the same cage. So was maybe I was riding that line and I didn't really help anybody in that situation. She wasn't hot enough where she wanted to put on a lot of weight or feed and get those reserves going or whatnot, and maybe he wasn't cold enough at the same time. So, but I have used it in some dwarf monitors. Like I've turned the lights totally off on some of the dwarf monitors from time to time. So they're just riding at whatever the ambient is in the room, which is about low 60s through the winter. And then I've left them there for a month, I think.
And some people only do it for like a month and a half, 2 months. Some people do it for a person that her name is Linnea, and she breeds savannas, right? Well, she did her first clutch. I think she basically kept them from a ton of food and high heat for like 5 or 6 months. And they laid, I think, 3 or 4 different clutches, literally, like where she had so many savannas, hatching out, and basically she was considering just culling some of the eggs because it's so much to keep up with. So Cody does it with his tree monitors. Vanessa Crutchfield, they keep theirs outside and they let them be exposed to those 50-degree nights and 60-degree nights without a problem. And you can see her success rate, just about every clutch. Oh,
you bring up a good thing, because, in some of these same areas, you're seeing, or you're hearing these horror stories like Florida with iguanas falling out of trees from freezes and everything. Now, we're not saying the area they're at that it's actually freezing, but when cooling animals, I think it's important that you make sure that the cage isn't wet. Like we were talking about humidity a little bit. Bring that humidity way down. Humidity kills in cold temperatures. Yeah. Cooler temperatures, humidity will kill. But also, you don't want a lot of airflow. So if you're rocking a screen top or something during that time, that can be fine if they have like a deep layer of substrate and they've got under there. Then there's no problem with the airflow issue at all. But if you still have like fans circulating air in the room, plus screen tops, plus not like they're just hiding in a log somewhere, you might run into some problems, because that draftiness is going to affect the animals, and it's actually going to suck some of the moisture right out of their skin. Where in the wild, if they can get to somewhere, even if it's cold, but they don't have airflow running over their skin that's pulling the stuff out, pulling water out, then they're going to do probably fine. You're going to have to experiment for your own, and as brave as you want to go, but just one of those things you want to remember before you run into a bad situation.
On humidity, so I know, like, obviously Vanessa and others that keep theirs outside in terms of just tree monitors, they're being exposed to these cooler temperatures. But I wonder how low or how high the humidity is going on those cooler nights. Because I know I've heard.
I would think that it gets cool. Like it gets cool, but the humidity is also lower. It's just not like a hot, blistering day.
No, I wouldn't assume that. But I've heard with people with tree monitors, like one of the main problems that they have is like a very sudden switch in humidity that can cause issues. So I haven't
Right.
heard like how low people would drop Prasinus complex stuff in terms like when you're cooling them. I don't know how exactly like low do you drop that humidity? And I know it's
Uh,
less misting and it's more ambient, right? I would assume.
Yeah, right. And so let's say if your cage has great soil at the bottom, right? And for anybody that is maybe confused about what to do, in the simplest form and the way to explain it, stop spraying, stop feeding, and maybe only have one lamp on. That's kind of how, in like to explain to somebody that just wants quick directions, right? But you'll eventually go where you notice that your cage is 70% humidity. Man, if you stop spraying it for weeks, which is the intent purpose, you'll notice it gets down to 50s and 30s without a problem. And then you'll have pockets, which is safe to say to still kind of have, but it's just not so dense in humidity. You know what I mean?
I understand. Yeah.
The combination is cool and dry and hot and wet, or hot and humid. Those are the combinations. And so if you have it wet and cold, then that's not the greatest combination. And then too dry and too hot is also, also is disastrous as well.
Yeah. Especially for the tropical stuff. I don't see, now you're saying that, I don't think I'll have a problem, because in the enclosure I'm building for these tree monitors, it's 8 feet tall, right? And I'm going to have like a 20-inch substrate lip. So I think it'll give me the ability to be able to actually like stop spraying, and like that humidity is going to leach up, especially.
Well, and also, okay, now where we get into balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of my mentors told me that when you figure out how to heat the bottom part of the enclosure and create that balance, because if all your heat is up here and then nothing heats up the soil at the bottom, because that let's say the mass, right? That mass of moist soil, if it just sits at the bottom and you got it on a basement floor, it's that floor and the bottom of that cage there, it's going to absorb that coldness. And so you actually just have stagnant soil that might be like 60 and 70 degrees. And then it creates very little humidity. It'll be wet, but it's not going to create humidity. So for me, in my enclosures, I have heating pads, cane mats, and dog blankets or whatever else, right? And they're side mounted, whether they're on the inside or the outside of the cage. If it's really thick wood, like about almost an inch, 3/4 to an inch, the cane mat is on the inside of the cage because it can't penetrate through that much wood.
I took a page out you and Mike's book, and I did the cane heat mat. I'm planning on doing that, another one on the tree monitors as well.
And
bump
then
it off the ground.
And then if your wood enclosure is thinner plywood, I just have a big heat mat on the outside, and it's just a regular Zoomad heat pad. One on the outside, at the bottom on the side, and then one at the bottom underneath the enclosure. And obviously the thinner plywood has to be mounted onto a frame to be sturdy.
Yeah, for sure.
So it can't just be thin plywood, because that'll just bow and bend and break and all that. So I have a couple enclosures that were built in different ways of whatever I can afford at the time. And one was built before the wood went up, and then one was built after the wood went up. So
I feel that
it's one of those things where it's just at the time, and I just thought quickly on my feet, well, damn, this wood is too thick, I'm just going to mount it on the inside. And so I mounted the cane mat on the inside, turned it up to medium, because they give you a rheostat, and then you can also buy a thermostat.
That's what I did.
So the idea is to heat up one section, and you can keep that part moist. Now, when it's dry time, you might not need to. Okay, so you just let that go, and then when it's time to utilize your enclosure, hopefully you got different options of nesting where they don't go there, but they might nest there. Okay, because they feel like the temperatures are good there, the humidity and everything like that is good. And like I said again, when you learn to work from the bottom half of your enclosure, because most people is super decorated up top. It's got great lamps and logs, and it's gorgeous up top. But dang, at the bottom, it's just a water dish and flat, dry bedding. Once you learn how to utilize that and heat up the bottom part with good usage of whatever heating material you use, and that will raise up itself. It'll go up, and you won't have to mist at all.
Yeah.
Guess how many times I missed my enclosures? A week.
Well, one time a week, I would guess, probably. Once or twice.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
it's
I remember you guys talking about that in the Kimberly Rock episode. You don't want to continually have them be in contact with moisture, right? It's more of an ambient leaching humidity.
And if you can have the soil moist, and that saturates the air itself, there's no need to then go and spray. So that's why people spray a lot, is because maybe they're trying to have a balance, but what they're also doing is adding unnecessary wetness.
It's all about that deep substrate. That's what I was learning from Frank. Frank Reedus preaches on that all the time. He's a super pro, like just deep substrate. I actually ran into, so before I heard you guys talk about that, I was doing that with my Pilbaras, right? Because it was like 10% humidity in the enclosure because I had a screen top. It's when I was newer with them. And so I was spraying, and it was in contact with this damp soil, right? And eventually it got to him to the point where he was getting some scale rot on the bottom of his tail. Like that, right? So I had to change the method. And so I went with more of a deep substrate with it was humid and moist, but I put a dry layer on top, like you guys were saying. And I stopped spraying, and eventually that humidity was able to leach into those little microclimates. So when he wanted to get to the 70s and 80s, he could go in there and he wouldn't be in contact with the water. But when he wanted drier, of course, he could come out. So
yeah. And that whole balance, bro, when I learned how to do it, it's not easy, okay? Because it's electrical and water and, wetness. So it's obviously the combination to anybody. It's like, that's not smart, right? But, if you're protected, if you keep it a protected heating material or whatever you feel like you're using, and that is balancing out the humidity coming from the bottom, raising up, then it's a lot easier to work around. But if if the bottom half was not thoroughly thought about, and it's just they just plopped soil in there, threw a water dish on it, and called it a day, well, then your cage is incomplete. So whenever people come to me and they tell me, hey, like, what do I do with my enclosure? I tell them, put it up, caulk it and seal it, and then work on the bottom first. When you like right now, when you do your stuff, Will, and you are accommodating your Blue Tree's needs, work on how you're going to do the bottom first, and then everything else just flows, because then obviously you've already accomplished the hardest part. But let's say if you decked it out and you did the top first, and you put on logs and you put on your heat lamps and everything else, but then you only left like a couple feet to work with, then you're subjected to just throw a bin down there. And it's not that it's the worst thing. It's just, it's harder because then you now have to work around that, I'll
run it by you guys to see if you have any suggestions. If that's cool.
Go ahead, man. Whenever you feel like it.
So what I've done, and let me know if this is kind of in line with what you guys do. So I've, of course, bumped it off the ground, right? Because I'm in an insulated garage, but of course the floor is going to be colder than the ambient, right? So I've bumped it up like 6 inches or so. So with the base, it's the most important, right? So I've started I put a pond liner in, so I don't want any soil and contact. Of course, I sealed the wood and everything, but I put a pond liner and a drain in, and then I'm going to do, like, the drainage layer is going to be milk crates that I'm going to cut up. Right, and then screen top, or screen like the window screening on top, and then I'm gonna put the substrate in, and then leaf litter on top, and I'm planning on doing 2 cane heat mats on the side to keep that soil like not freezing cold, right? So I think a mixture of the drainage, the heat, and the depth of it sounds like it would be decent, right?
Yeah, and you're in Maryland, so you get snow, right? And the floor gets like
pretty cold. But the garage is insulated, though. The floor won't get that cold. It's insulated, so it was like 60, 70 in the winter.
Okay, so here's an example. For you, it might work great that way. But for me, I actually have my cages touching the floor because it gets too hot here in California.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if I didn't have that cold floor of being 60 degrees or whatnot, and I raised it too high, then the ambient air in the room gets underneath that cage, and then it changes the temperature. But what I'm trying to do is I'm actually using the cold floor to my purpose, and basically to keep my cage from getting so hot.
It's
So
like equilibrium almost with the heat.
right, I'm actually utilizing the cold floor, and that's going to make my enclosure bottom 60, 70 degrees when I need it, and then the rest of the enclosure just blends in, you know. But let's say if I didn't, you know, for me it works that way. And so that's why we always, even if we're teaching these things, we want to still recommend people, hey, like, you have to also be considerate about your outside temperatures, your room temperatures, your how hot your summers get, how cold your winters get. And to be honest, bro, if you've seen everybody's success, not everybody, but a lot of people's, you know, like, hey, they're like, hey, my monitor's just laid, or hey, my monitor just hatched, or they're doing this. It's all in around October, November, December, January, February, right? So many of us have had this, and that's the coldest times of the year. You know what I mean? And it has to mean something, you know.
So are you guys making your enclosures colder around that time, or is that when you're starting to heat them up? Because it sounds like it's not too dependent on like the time of year, or more so the when you decide to put them through the cooler.
Yes. So you can manipulate it, like me and Cody. We manipulate it by changing. We can change the temperatures in the cage, but some people don't fight the winter at all. They just let the cages naturally cool down, and as they come up, the animals do too. So, like I said before, some people don't got to do nothing, bro. You know, they don't have to do a thing, but just take care of them. You know what I mean?
Okay, that makes sense.
And they may not be doing any of the other stuff, but the coolness and the follicle building and things like that the animal did at that time was beneficial to them. You know?
Okay.
So, as an example, like, and I haven't talked to him about this or his approach, but we had a conversation. Alex from Sin Container, and he now has a couple clutches of Spencer's. So we were talking about this, and at one point we're like, you know, I think they'll do great over here in Northern California where we're at, because we get a cold enough winter. It's not like there's snow on the ground out here, but we get a cold enough winter, and then we get a warm enough summer. And if you've seen Spencer, if you've ever seen a Spencer's in person, a lot of the ones in the U.S. that you're going to see, they're fat, they're chunky.
Yeah.
A lot of them are big and overweight. And if you ever see pictures of them out in like the what would you say, the harsh point of
black soil,
when they first are waiting for that rain to happen. They are just a like the worst import you could ever hope for coming in, right? And so we're talking about that being vital to them, and how this overweight business that you see is actually hurting them. But they're so ready to eat because they're this survival type monitor. That means survival to them. So back to what Kai was saying about or calculated neglect, right? It's like, nah, you gotta starve this monitor. You gotta change the temps on them. You gotta cool them down, and then bring them back up. Do all those other key indicators when things are right. And so far, if I haven't talked to Alex we've talked here and there, but not in depth. But it seems like if that's what he was doing, it seems like it's working with the Spencers. There's something else I was going to say. You were talking about the drainage layer and the cold coming up from the bottom. You can still use that cold. If it's in the 60s, like you said, mid-60s, you can actually use that to your advantage to accomplish that cooling period without doing anything if you're in that area.
It's the option is there.
Yeah, I just worry about stagnant soil is my biggest fear with that. You know what I mean?
I will say a lot of that, in my experience, is the types of soil you're using, and it might take a little bit of experimentation with that soil. So if you have and you'll have to, like, whatever's available to you in Maryland, there's going to be some things that are the same, right? You're going to have probably access to sand and some other things.
Yeah, peat, topsoil,
some sort of
stuff.
Yeah, those type of things. But you're going to have to mix up and see what drains better for you. So if you're getting those stagnant problems, you might have to add more sand into the mix. You might have to add something that retains moisture better if you're not getting the type you want, where every time you dig down, it's just dusty, you know?
I add more sand, and it's hard to kind of just tell everybody this, you know. Not everybody. People kind of like want like a set it and forget it type of deal.
It's not like that.
It's not like that at all. You know what you're gonna do, bro? You're gonna every month to keep from the stagnant happening, and not only that, you'll be digging to make sure that it's good. You're just gonna dig it up, turn it, and turn it, and turn it, and turn it. And I have to do that every other month. Every month, I'm doing that for a few purposes. Not only am I making sure that the soil is good for the female, I'm making sure that it has enough water so that way I don't got to really spray it. You know, what I'll do is I don't do a finger test because it's not good enough, but I do an arm test. You know, you dig down and you shove your arm down in there and you kind of get a feel of how it is. And if you pull out soil and it doesn't clump up well, then you might have to add more water. And you may find yourself at a balance and you see like, okay, this is good. I don't really need to do a whole lot for the next 2 months, right? And so that's where you get an idea, okay, every 2 to 3 months or every month and a half, 2 months, I'll then change it. I'll check it. I'll turn the leaves. Yep. I'll turn everything, you know? And so for me, don't get me wrong, the drainage idea sounds really good. It's almost unnecessary. I mean, for us with big lizards, right?
Yeah.
They'll dig right through that, you know? And I was going to mention for you to secure it so well that they can't. But even a tree monitor, I think it can get down there, you know?
Yeah, it has an on and off valve. So if I want to drain it, I can. Like, mostly for excess water that would pool. But it's not going to be, like, drained where it will freely come through. If I need extra moisture to sit in, I can close the valve and it can do so.
I meant, like, the actual layer.
Okay.
The plastic that you'll be using, right? What were you going to be using?
So I just have a pond liner to protect the wood. That's just to protect the wood.
But then what were you going to...
Like milk crate? I was going to do like milk crate.
Right? Yeah, so I honestly, don't get me wrong. I don't want to destroy your idea. And your
No.
It's almost unnecessary for monitors and what you'll do with it. You know, just because not only can they dig through that, down that, and up, you know, for us, his sand monitors and my mangroves, they're like, oh, what? That's fun. Let me
for sure. You know? I was just thinking, like, since I've never kept tree monitors, but I keep Argus monitors or Argus monitor. Obviously, he's going to dig that up. So I was wondering, like, do you think a tree monitor would go down that deep to dig?
Absolutely.
They would? Okay.
When I had the tree monitors, they would dig right down to whatever I gave them. The most I ever gave them, I think, was about 20 inches.
Really?
And
I just wouldn't underestimate them, you know?
No, of course.
I wouldn't underestimate them. But I get what you're doing, though. I get because it's so much moisture, and if you make it too wet, because you've already experienced that, right?
Yeah.
If it's too wet, then your animals end up with blisters and whatever else, and then the water, you know, the excess water runs through the milk crate and then goes down to the bottom, right? And then that also, like, creates a smell and a thing on its own. Yeah, that water sitting there, it's not pretty.
Yeah.
So
the reason I was thinking that is because two things. One, I'm sure you guys are familiar with, like, Chris Applin. When he went to Batanza, the island, he noted the hardness of the soil. So I was thinking, like, and this was a lapse in judgment. One, because, you know, if you give a monitor something to play with, it's going to play with it no matter if it's natural or not, right? Yeah. So I was thinking, like, oh, they probably won't dig down there because they're not used to it in the wild. But, you know, if they see it, they'll mess with it. Right. So, yeah, I'll definitely have to take that into consideration for sure, guys. Second, I want to do plants. Oh, I just got a cramp in my leg. Sorry. I just hit legs before I came here.
That that was your first mistake. You see?
Yeah, I know, right?
Me and Kai did
that was bad. But I want to do plants in the bottom, and I wanted to kind of plant it and make it kind of like its own living ecosystem. That's the idea I had with this enclosure.
Yeah.
Just because I like to be extra and make my stuff cool, right?
Right.
So how would you go about that? Since I want to do plants in the bottom.
The dry season, right? With your plants being live, we don't use plants only because we'll have to take them all out, you know. But if, like, let's say if you really love your plants, bro, and in your enclosure, because the plants only really, because at 85, 90 degrees they'll die, right? They'll die.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you'll have to probably find really sturdy plants. But then you get into the excess moisture, excess humidity.
And that was my reason for the drainage, because it was kind of in that same thought process. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, like when you're going through the lowest combination and you're at your very bottom, you might have to take the plants out because, they'd either die, or if you were in love with those plants and you paid a lot of money, you might need to set them up in a thing and then replant them when it's, then it triggers the monitor itself, because then it's back up to being really flourishing and stuff like that. So I that's why almost 80-90% of us don't use too many plants, is we can't keep them alive, or the process of breeding and stuff like that just will kill them anyways. And
this is my first one I was going to try with plants. So it's kind of like, I'm going to run the enclosure a while before I get the actual tree monitors, just to kind of, so I guess it's kind of a test of what will happen. If they die, they die, Can't remove them.
We scale everything too in our heads. We scale everything to fit in enclosure, or we have this idea how we want it to look like a snapshot. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Like if you're out there, you have a whole jungle of this stuff to grow. And so
for sure.
If something got tore up, we wouldn't know one way or the other if something got tore up. And for a monitor, when they're locked in there with only so much space, regardless of how big it is, it's still a cage. They do get bored. They do get destructive. They get, and it's not even, I can't tell you how many just light fixtures that I've had to like hang for different reasons that I've had to replace the bulbs in, because
so annoying.
Jumping, swinging from a light fixture.
So annoying.
Yeah, or I've had to pick them up off the ground. And with plants, it's like if you can find. So you said blue trees, right? Was it blue trees?
Yeah, but that's why I'm going such a big enclosure. I'm hoping that would kind of negate, and like the very trafficked areas, I'm not going to put anything. So I'm trying to strategically plan it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So,
but the thing is, what would you pick that? I had the same thought, because I had the blue trees in like a big walk-in enclosure. But what would you pick that would be sturdy enough, that would provide the look you want? Because a lot of times, when we think jungle, we think these big like leafy plants, but they're not very strong. Is the problem?
No.
A lot of those.
Yeah.
So now you're into looking at like basically small shrubs. And they can almost be just as much headache if they're strong enough and they provide a look and an actual hiding thing. And what do you do when your monitor gets wrapped around it back there, especially a tree monitor that's using its tail, and now you're in a battle with this monitor in the cage because you have to go hands on for something, and you got to pull them out of this thing. These are just the different thoughts or things we've ran into.
No, for sure.
If there's a way you can figure out how to do it, believe me, I want to too still, but it just hasn't made sense yet. So.
It's going to be an experiment with me, man. Like we say, like, dude, monitors destroy everything. So I'm thinking I got to find something sturdy enough and kind of keep it out of the hot zone and out of their high trafficked areas. It'll be an experiment.
For some plants, I feel like if you have them in your 60s and 70 range, and you're working from that point, and then they have that ability to stay at those temperatures, I think they'll stay alive a lot longer than the other side of the enclosure or your hotter side. So I commend your big enclosure, because I think it'll be allowing for optimum usage, as far as you can make the hot side really hot, 110, 15 degrees ambient up there, and then surface temperatures of 130, 140 or whatnot, and then all the way at the bottom on the opposite end, then you're looking at your 60s and 70s, stuff like that.
That's what I'm hoping, is it'll kind of give me a big enough gradient to where I can find the area that these plants will thrive and not be kicked about, right? Because I'm sure there will be some that'll be torn to shreds, and some they won't even touch, I guess, just because of where they like to be. But like I said, it's all going to be a big experiment. I'm sure you guys will see it.
Yeah, and you would want to. What you want to do is probably get onto some of those the groups and basically ask, hey, like, what plants do you guys use that are pretty durable? I think Cody's got some in his enclosures as well. And so they're like sword plants or type of plants, umbrella plants, things like that.
That's what I'm going for.
Yeah, I don't have the greatest green thumb with plants, and so, and really, it's just another thing to take care of. When
that's what I'm saying. That's what it's facts.
When I don't need to, but I do use my leaf litter, and I let that change the look and the flow of the cage, and so it varies on the plants on what you want to do. Don't get me wrong, man. Like, I've seen guys that I think I forget his name. I forget his name, but he's got a blue tree. And
is it Stewart?
No, it's another gentleman that he's an American, and he has a pretty heavily planted blue tree enclosure, right? And
is it Brad? Brad?
Yeah, I think it's Brad.
Yeah, that's my homie. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think he has, a good idea on what plants you can use. I don't know if he's breeding, and to be honest, man, I the whole plant thing with breeding, if it incorporates it, I don't really think it matters,
Yeah.
Just as long as your lizards are doing their thing, and then the plants might take a toll if you're really drying them out.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if he's drying them out at all, So if you're you might find yourself, bro, where, because your enclosure incorporates all of the necessities, right? Hot and really cold. You might not need to do a whole lot, Will, at all. Where you might just kick the lamp off a little bit to get them cooler, and not spray, so that way your humidity's down. But other than that, you might find yourself just keeping, and then they just do things naturally on their own because the cage is making them happy,
Yeah. I'm trying to give them every single type of climate they could want, right? So like warm, cool, drier areas, humidity pockets. Just trying my best to provide that for them. So yeah, man, it's definitely a good thing to look at when you're designing your enclosure now. Again, work from the bottom, seeing what space you have for stuff, and then go ahead and checking out. I really recommend, doing the most that you feel like it, but also, try not to get ahead of yourself where the plants become more important than no, of course not. The plants are mainly just for human, like just to look at and be like, oh, that looks
just
nice.
To look at,
Yeah.
And then if that's the case, you could just get really nice fake stuff, and then just put it up, right? It's not the same, but still it's one of those things that it gives the greenery look, right?
Mm-hmm.
I try it, and my monitors just rip it down.
Yeah.
So
it'll be an experiment. We'll see, man. We'll see how it goes.
I get stuff from Michael's every few months, and I just spent because it's expensive for one of those ropes, right? And I bought, I buy it for $15-20 or how much ever they cost. Even when they're on sale, they're kind of still expensive. And when you got to buy like 10 or 12 of them, it gets costly. But I'll twine them up, and I try to make it look nice and decent, but they just rip them down. And so I don't find myself really successful with plants, even the fake ones, man.
One other thing I wanted to bring up as far as the soil in the cage or the substrate in the cage, and I'm going to do this here with everything coming home. After using the cage for a while, using that substrate, you're going to want to change it. You're going to want to refresh it almost.
Mm-hmm.
The way stuff gets broken down, monitor basically feces, urates, and whatnot, it's going to make the soil more often than not, in my experience, pretty acidic in certain ways. So after a while, it seems like they almost don't want to nest in that same soil. I don't know. There's probably other people that have more experience with it than I do, but it seems like just like other animals would like a certain healthy type of soil. They're looking for a certain type to nest in, but it just, I don't know. It's something that I'm starting to notice and catch on to. I've heard it from other people. I had a good buddy that lived close by me, and he used the same soil for 7 years, and then his animals just stopped using that soil completely, where he had to change it all out. And it was almost across the board. He kept Ackies in a huge colony type of shed, and he ended up having to change everything almost at the same time. So soil does lose. I don't know if it's nutrients or some kind of consistency. Maybe it's the biomatter in there breaking down to a certain point under it, or what. But just as a thought, you probably be fine for a couple of years. But know that at some point, if things aren't working out right, it's like, just keep it in the back of your head. I might need to change that out or add something to it. And that might be true if you just continually add, like Kai was saying, leaf litter, stuff that'll break down, almost like its own compost pile in and of itself.
Leaf litter itself with some moisture, as it's breaking down, the pH changes a lot.
Yeah.
So you'll I use stuff from Aubrey, the last guest that we had that also produced the coli. I've already congratulated him a million times, but congrats to Aubrey on getting a good clutch. But yeah, man, he sends me leaves, right, that they utilize. They love it. Whenever I get a shipment of leaves, I undo them and I just throw them all over the cage, and then I turn it, and then I put some more in. It essentially feeds it, and then I have powder oranges. I don't know if you're familiar with isopods, but get yourself some, try to find a good connect where, they'll sell you 500 for a great price or something like that. And
I got some backyard grays. Is what
that's what I use. I use the grays,
shaking handfuls, shaking handfuls. And me, when I love lifting up logs and lifting up water dishes. And I was like, dang, you guys are doing so good.
It's like an ecosystem. It's so cool.
And that's good. If the isopods are doing great, you kind of know your soil is doing good. So
cool.
Essentially, it's fed nutrients. The nutrients is then taken from it, and then the waste is taken from it, turned into good nutrients. Basically, whenever bugs go through soil, they typically make it something good, a good compost. A richer compost. It's science. It's why people use feces from crickets and things like that, and they add that to their plants at home, and it's basically, I guess, I don't know, it's just high in nutrients for the plants.
Compost,
right? Yep. And it's just good compost, and it's something good to think about. When you're going through your soil, and you obviously want to make it an incredible enclosure. Don't get me wrong. Love the look, love the idea, and don't get discouraged by what we're talking about as far as we suck at plants and we can't keep plants alive. Do it, try it, but also remember that you'll have to then. This look is going to change. It'll go from greenery to fall. And there's no leaves and the colors of green and blues and purples have changed to yellows and reds and tan.
Absolutely.
And that's the look that you kind of want. For me, in my island monitors, what I'm trying to get a feel of is a sandy, dry beach look. That's because my animals are from islands, and it's not like paradise or whatever. It's like when you go into the jungle a little bit, borderline the beach, and then you get that coolness. It's shaded. There's a whole lot of sand and dry leaf litter and basically debris, and that's all dry.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and obviously your monitors aren't, they're island monitors as well. They may not be beach going island monitors like mine are, but you'll figure out a balance for yourself.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Go ahead, man. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's all about that perspective too. It's like we have to. There's different ways. Like maybe it's even for your own self putting plants. Especially if you're keeping monitor temperatures, the ambient just within the room, putting plants within the room might give you that same feeling, and as opposed to in the cage, because we see these pictures. You'll see like you brought up Chris Applin, but you'll see like a picture of a monitor somewhere, right, in the shot. Usually the monitor is actually on the bark in a tree.
Yeah.
And what you can see in your peripheral, your mind's taking in the fact that there's green up at the canopy, there's other smaller green plants, but the monitors aren't hiding on this little palm-looking fern thing.
That's true.
But that's all in the background. So your perspective as a human, like you take all this in, so you're like, I want that. But if you actually look where the monitors are, they're on a sturdy brown gray,
that's tree
branch.
Very true.
And they're basically sunbathing. So, when they're basking, that they're slowly dehydrating, or that area that they're at, there's wind going and sun going. And, it's not just at the pockets down at the very bottom, which are humid. It's way different up there,
That's why I'm trying to design it like exactly like you said, Alan, like not totally like where they're going to be, like have the plants around it to where those high trafficked areas are those, or is that bark and is those sturdy, drier surfaces to where the plants are kind of around there, creating that effect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I would go for. If you're going to do it, go for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And be prepared for the plants to die because it'll happen. they'll kill them.
Yeah. Shoot, man, you got more questions as far as like the cooling stuff, or what to implement, or what questions you might be stumped on, or some of the topics I kind of covered?
I had a couple. So one of them was on introduction of what you guys have seen with your introduction. So I know a lot of the time introduction is basically an established female in her enclosure, and most people introduce the male. One, I wanted to inquire about, like, sometimes I've seen people do female into a male's enclosure but not be as successful, obviously, right, because she's not established. And then what have you guys seen in terms of like separation or keeping them together? Because I know like all monitors are different. A lot of the Odastria can live together more often than something like an Argus monitor, right? Most people don't keep them together full time. So what have you guys seen in your animals about that?
Go ahead, Alan.
Almost everything. So
yes.
Yeah, I'm just kind of like, you guys are going to work it out. And it's kind of with like, maybe there's a little arrogance in it. It's like, I've met your other needs. I'll provide you food. You guys work it out. But at the same time, there's been a couple instances where I've noticed one animal in particular is like, just picks on other. I've noticed it a lot with raise up groups, more than adults, is raise up groups, and it seems like it's individuals, and you might just have an individual monitor, and it's just up to you to catch that in that monitor if they're one of those types that's just going to beat up on other animals. I've noticed that in a few different clutches of babies. It's like, well, this one animal is just picking on the rest. In fact, I think that's what happened in a shipment. I shipped out a large amount, or a good sized group, and I think one animal, it was a warmer, I was shipping it to Florida. I think one animal was just in there biting onto its siblings and causing some damage while en route. And I'm not there to separate them like I usually would be. So if it wants to just stay locked on, and do the death roll for a whole shipment, it's like, I hope that didn't happen, but it might have. But as far as pairing adults, man, I've taken the chance. I've gotten two separate animals from two different areas. As soon as I knew they were doing healthy, they were feeding with me, and they were doing what they're normally supposed to do, I've paired them up, and I've been successful. So I haven't had that bad experience to make me shy away from it yet. And even if I did, I would have to weigh it against all the other experiences where I've put things together and they've done fine. I would say even to this point, I'm still waiting for it, but the Dorianus, they've messed each other up sometimes, but it's not anything more than, I would say, superficial for monitors, which is still somewhat bloody and will probably leave a mark or a scar. But in my mind, it's like, okay, well, that's it. And it's almost like you start noticing if something's too much, it's like clearly too much.
Yeah.
And you're not going to probably get to it unless you're in there 24/7. You're probably not going to get to it in time anyway, which is the scary part. If a monitor wants to kill another monitor, it's probably going to accomplish it. If a monitor wants to pester and bug or deter another monitor and say, this is mine, it's not going to kill it. It's just going to punk it and stress it out to the point where that monitor is going to stress out and die if you don't do something about it. But like my sand monitors, oh man, if I could tell you like some of the stuff they've done to each other, most people I would say will separate them and say they're not compatible. I mean, there's been times where the female's arm is just almost looks like it's split right in half. Wow. And for a couple of days, she's dragging an arm behind her. And I don't share this a lot with a lot of people, but because different people will have all kinds of opinions. But this is a proven pair of animals that within a week they're right back to whatever they were doing. You know, and it could be as simple as the male was she had a chick in her mouth, and the male was trying to pull her out from the hole she didn't want to come out of, and he was grabbing her by the arm and pulling her by that, you know. So, man, I guess maybe that's my view in my head. My experiences have led me to the point where it's like, if I don't see them going right for the jugular when I pair them up together, trying to, you know, rip that animal's throat out, then to me they're going to work it out. It might not be pretty, but they're going to work it out. And you know, I think we try to be too controlling sometimes, and things are scary. Like in Kai's position, let's say you got coli, and there's only a few animals. And it's like, how far does a sane person let this go? Yeah, but it might be what they need to work it out to get to the point where they're now producing. So
and how far? Okay, so you got to understand why I work so immensely hard with them, right? And bro, it's not even the breeding. The breeding is so simple. Like, it's a smooth process when it works, right? But all that beforehand, bro, they're like wrestling and fighting and you know, the male's chasing the female. Sometimes the female's whipping his butt, right? And what I would recommend is not to take anybody else's advice and just study your animals.
Yeah, I like that.
Then what you're going to do is just play off of the interaction and the behavior. Like, if they're, you know, if the male is too aggressive on the female, or the female is really aggressive on the male, or they just, you know, they don't really work well together, then you'll have to separate them and then only introduce when you know she is developing follicles.
Okay.
So essentially, that's the only time that you'll be doing it. And for me, in 3 or 4 of my clutches, that's the case. The case is they live in the cage together, but there's a partition, and then the partition, I have a pipe that runs through this little hole, right? This little square hole, and the pipe runs through both enclosures. The male can't fit through the pipe, but the female can, and she'll just go through back and forth whenever she feels like it. Most of the time, she'll stay on her side, but if she wants the male's attention and things like that, she knows to go right over. Currently, I've been really good with him not beating her up, which is, like I mentioned earlier, he's changed so much. But I don't just take that as being like, I get complacent and be like, oh, they'll be fine now. Because they may not be when he's trying to breed, she's not receptive, and then he bites her. You know what I mean? or she's nest guarding, and she just laid or she's about to lay, and she's not having it at all. So she's going to try to kill him. So if you're introducing your animals now, tree monitors, don't get me wrong, many times they can be quite compatible, right? You've seen a lot of people keep them together, but that's not always the case.
That's what I was going to ask. Nest defensiveness, for one, I've seen that's a big thing.
Right, and it's a major thing with females for sure, because it's essential. She's doing the motherly thing of protecting her eggs, and she thinks the male who's going to be opportunist and try to eat those, and then she's going to protect them. And so I typically give it about 2 to 3 weeks after she's laid to then undo the latch, and then she can go back over, right? But it's not always that case. And then I have a couple other monitors that they're okay. They have bites on them, but they're not like, it's a little tussle, it's something that he got bit right here, and then it's just now a scar. It healed over within a day or so, it's never too bad. So I'm just like, hey, I'll take it for what it is. If it's too bloody and somebody's limping, then I'll then separate you. Now, all of my enclosures are built this way now, except for the babies' enclosures. But for the adults, there's a partition in every enclosure. So when it's time for me to lock the female up and away, or they're done breeding, she's on that side and he's on this side. For you, if your enclosure is extremely big, and let's say you don't design it with the partition, right? How wide is your enclosure?
It's 5 feet across, 4 feet deep.
So
and 8 feet tall.
that's pretty decent. If you design it with a partition, then I would say do it, so that way you don't have to make another enclosure. But if you don't do it, and let's say you just leave it in there during the time of her laying or after, it can be pretty bad for him, or bad for the female if he's too aggressive, or bad for your results if you're really trying to get eggs, but you left a male in there and he just ate them as she popped them out.
Yeah.
So that's not always smart either. So you might have to have a separate little 4 or 5 foot enclosure that he just goes to on vacation.
That was my plan to do a separate.
He goes on vacation, right? And then whenever you're ready, or whenever you feel she's ready, you put him back in. The reintroduction, bro, may not always happen and work out the same
what I've seen.
as what it did before. Some females may be really ornery to the whole space now, and so you might have to change stuff around, or put him in there for a while, let him scent it up, right, and put her in that enclosure, that the vacation enclosure, for a little while, and then let them kind of get each other's feel again without the other one around. Now, like I said again, you're judging really on the behavior your lizards will be showing you. If you feel like they're okay and they're not tussling and fighting, or and sometimes, bro, it might not even be nothing about fighting, but let's say food time, right? Food time sucks because he's so like a male. He's basically going to eat. He's going to be right in front of your face, taking all the food. Yeah. And then she gets what? Leftovers. She gets what she can as a straggler. She's so shy that you got to, feed her in a tube, or put her food in a tube. In worst cases, you got to take the male out, feed her, and then, feed the male either in a separate place, or let her get full, put the male in, and then feed him. You see how it's not even aggressive. Yeah. It's just then it just doesn't
dominance
work
kind of a little bit.
Right, it doesn't work with the whole flow. So if that's the case, then you will have to then adjust to that. I have like my Jody, right? He's so dumb, bro. Like he's just so he's like, I just I kind of swat him with the tongs. I'm like, bro, go over there. I'm trying to feed the female. Yeah. And so now what I do is I take him out and I put him in a small enclosure that I have for all the males. Whenever the male's not really getting along, I have a couple extra enclosures for space, essentially, right? They're just empty to just throw a monitor into.
Yeah.
Let's say I need to clean a cage or do something, I just put them in there. And what I do is I feed him in there now, feed the female up I just throw in food. I don't even wait there because there's so much to do, right? So I throw in food just for her. Whenever I feel like she's done, I'll then pull him out and put him back in the enclosure. But picture doing that every day, so it's tricky. That's why for me, I always recommend the partition or to have space between it. You can throw in a ton of food, but damn, that also means that the male is unregulated, and he's just eating so much that he's just going to get fat anyways. And fat monitors don't breed well.
And I've seen that was a problem in someone that was actually keeping them. They were basically just unregulated, throwing in food, and the male was getting it all. The female was getting next to nothing, and that doesn't bode well. So
right.
Yeah.
So those are some things you might run into, and not always is it like that, but it definitely is a possibility, and it's a high one just because I've seen it happen quite a bit. Males get really comfortable naturally. The females are naturally pretty shy, and so they're more timid. They're gonna wait, So it's one of those things. Some ideas would be to have females be led into a tube, and then she's fed in the tube, right? So she doesn't really get the attraction of the male to come over, and then he's fed, and then you just take care of him quickly with some bits and pieces and things like that.
I like it.
Well, one thing I was forgot to mention as far as what I do off and on season is types of food that I use during the off season. Okay, so off season is when it's cooler, drier, less humidity, less photo period, and they don't get the high calorie
That's what I was
foods.
thinking.
So I'm feeding bugs, shrimp, crawfish, fish, essentially things that don't have the yolk, the fat, the extra protein that mice, day-old chicks, day-old quail, things like that would normally have. So when you're doing the off-season part, they're eating the stuff that doesn't really make them fat. And they only get to eat once or twice a week just for maintenance, just to keep them from being anorexic, And they get that. But then when you introduce those other things with high calories,
it's like a snack.
That's the bomb. That's the calorie bomb, and that's the fat bomb, and that's what we kind of call it. Quail, day-old quail, or even the balut quail eggs that are fertile quail eggs. If you find a guy local to you that breeds them and can sell you them for cheap, or you buy them from Adam's Quail or whatever, or whoever you buy them from, get those are literally almost the best food that you can give them.
That's what I've heard.
Lean. Yeah, they're lean. They got full of the nutrients. If they eat the shell, great, and essentially they're bite-sized little, perfect food items.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you want to incorporate that and make sure that you've, taken that into consideration. Because if, let's say, you are maintenance feeding them mice and rats and chicks, that doesn't really help with. Yeah.
They'll be hip to it already, so it's like they won't even phase them. We have small chickens. They're called bantam chickens. So the eggs are pretty small, but they're a little bit more fatty than quail is. You know what I mean? I mean, it would still work, but I think I've talked to Adam in the past, so I think I'll probably end up going the quail egg route as well, just for variety as well,
Right, and it's good enough to throw in a Ziploc bag, freeze it, pop out 5, 10 when you need them, defrost them. They defrost so fast, and you just use those as. Honestly, man, if I can feed just that, and then I use my fish and crawfish, that's what I would use. But I have, the animals are a bit bigger. If it was like an Ackie or the tree monitors, if I had them, I would utilize those a whole lot more.
Cool.
But yeah, man, it goes to show from what you're feeding this to what you're feeding them, and it works for me.
I like it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool.
Right.
I had one more question, and then we can go to the last section that you wanted to talk about. I gotta ask because it's been pending on my mind for months. What are you guys doing about the floodlight, the halogen floodlight ban?
Oh,
Other than
dude,
stocking up?
we're almost not doing anything. No,
I'm scared. I really am.
We're at the mercy of.
Oh, you guys are in California too, so you guys
right? Yeah, we were the first ones to get implemented, right? But I've been a criminal, man. I get stuff imported.
I ain't no rat, man.
I just my guys from out east, and I'm paying $25 a bulb because I'm not, I try not to be cheap for them doing my work, so they're doing the footwork. I pay them for the gas, I pay them for shipping, so and then the bulbs I'm paying for.
So is it illegal to have them in California? Like you can't.
I don't know if it's. No. I don't think it's that. It's that. It's just they don't want.
Because I found a couple websites. that ship.
Says California not allowed to ship, right?
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I don't want to scare people and say we're just doomed because they're.
I'm just looking for alternatives. You know what I mean?
They make. Okay. Let's say if your summer is really blistering, right? Arcadia makes soft white bulbs as well.
Yeah, I like Arcadia. So I use all the UVs.
Yeah, they make a 50 watt and 75 watt. They're still a floodlight, but they're not like the hard shell bulbs. They're the bulbs that John use. Okay, they're the soft white floodlights. They're indoor floodlights. Now the outdoor floodlights are the hard shell bulbs where you can spray them and they don't break. Right?
Yeah.
Those are also made by Arcadia as well, par 38, but damn, they get pretty hot. And I've already used the safe 75 watt, and it gets pretty hot. So if you feel like
expensive too, huh?
Yeah, it's like $15 a bulb. I mean, it is double the price of a $5 bulb from Home Depot, but man, what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
And if I'm paying a dude $25 per bulb,
facts.
I'm okay with $15.
Facts.
Now ZoomEd has a splash guard turtle bulb that comes in 35, 50, 75, and 90 and 100, something like that. So that's also another type of par 38 bulb. I think it's par 30 and then par 38 for the very large ones.
I think so.
And then people are also... What happened, Alan?
Oh, I was just going to add this in. It looks like they got 50, 75, and 100 watt 4-packs of bulbs from Pangea.
Yeah.
This is what I've been using in all my cages. I figured out how to use them because I could buy 4-packs of them. And they're, let's see, like $40 for a 4-pack.
It's not bad.
And I'm still getting them from them. They're so it's not the full size. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me see.
Oh, that's still decent.
That's decent. That's not bad.
That's where I'm still getting them. So
if you use them side by side, they work good, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
You just need more fixtures.
That's what I'm using.
Just got to put more fixtures in.
Yeah, so I've even messed around. So I bought some of those, and then there's like these little 35 watt or 30 watt halogen bulbs that kind of look like the G9s halogens, like Zilla uses, those little ones, but they're inside of a regular socket and they got a little mini dome reflector. You can still get those, as far as I know, on Amazon, and they're just in there to supplement a little more heat for certain things, like I was in the winter. In the summer, I can usually run one of my my dwarf monitor cages on 150 watt, and it seems to be working all right. So right now I also have like 175 watt in the sand monitor cage, and then along with another bulb, and then excuse me, allergies are killing me out here. And then a 50 watt, I think, with another bulb. No. I changed it to just one bulb in the Dorianus cage, and then I used 2 bulbs in the Savannah monitor cage. I still got. Man, I still got to get rid of that Savannah monitor, but everything's been crazy. It's been last on the list. So, anyways, I just remembered myself. But so I'm using those bulbs, and they work fine for me. The only thing I wish is that these incandescent halogens lasted longer. Of course, because
they burn out.
Yeah.
Another combination somebody told me about is using like a Power Sun or Mega Ray. I use Mega Ray, and then next to a other bulb that's going to do the majority of the work for you. Now, Power Suns and Mega Rays aren't that great of surface temperature basking because they don't
Right.
get that hot down, down below a foot away. So comparable, a 70 watt Mega Ray next to a 45 watt floodlight, at the same distance, the 45 floodlight gets a lot hotter for surface temperatures. Like it's reaching 130 with no problem.
Yeah.
While the Power Sun or the Mega Ray only gets like 95, maybe 110, something like that, right?
That's what I'm doing.
Not as hot, but
I find the wattage doesn't really translate depending on different
no,
bulbs.
it
like
doesn't.
different.
It's the actual lumens and
Yeah.
and how the face of the bulb works. But deep heat projectors with UV bulbs.
That's what I've been doing. I've been doing deep heat projectors. I've experimented deep heat with an LED to kind of still make that light area.
Yeah,
And it's the type of heat they give off is decent. Like I don't dislike it.
right. It's good. It's a strong. The deep heat
Yeah.
projectors are a strong bulb.
It's
Even
different when you
though-
put your hand under it. It's like
Yeah.
you can feel the difference.
Feel the heat, right? And I would say they're meant for bigger monitors, desert monitors. I use them for the my thin skinned monitors, and it's too hot. Even I had to keep it like at 2 feet away, and even then at 2 foot, it was still like 150 surface temperature. So I was like, damn, these things are strong. And so I had to take them out because I realized if my monitors got too close to that, they just burn. So I had to switch up. If they designed like a 35 watt one, because I just get so hot here and how I use my bulbs, they're just too hot at a 100 watt bulb, So Power Suns and UV bulbs and all that stuff like that next to a deep heat projector is what other people are recommending. What's another one? It's on the.
I might be experimenting with those deep heat projectors.
Yeah, there's
for
a
the
there's a
same
couple.
reason.
There's a
They're not
couple
bad.
companies- Yeah, there's
I like
a couple
them.
companies. I think the smart companies will recognize that, or someone will message them and be like, "Hey, like, what are you going to do about this issue?" I think the smart big companies will realize that monitor keepers and it's even though monitor keepers kind of started the trend, I now see bearded owners, Uromastic owners,
Collar lizards,
yeah,
Heloderma.
yeah, anybody that would essentially need a high basking spot, and obviously they don't want to pay 50 60 bucks for a Power Sun or whatever, or they're actually $80-$90 now.
It's crazy.
They're
It's
going and utilizing the floodlights that we use from Home Depot and Lowe's. So I think when people catch on, and I'm talking about the big companies that make bulbs already, I think they'll eventually somewhat develop a thing for us.
I hope
that
so.
may help out. I know Arcadia has already dropped it, and they've already done it, and obviously it's not the same, but it kind of is. Obviously it's not the same price, but the functionality of the bulb is quite the same. It is, I wish they made like 45 and 50 watts and 60 watts, but they have a 50 watt and a 75 watt. It's just the bulb's a lot smaller. So if for monitor keepers, it's not a crazy thing because we already utilize, a bank of bulbs, like 1 or 2, 3 bulbs, right? Instead of just one. But let's say if I wanted to utilize just one bulb, I really couldn't, So
Yeah.
it's a balance.
Someone we might be going back to remember the Hot Rocks.
Oh,
But
nah.
check it out. New technology, basically, making it a lot safer for surface temperatures and whatnot. But it's almost like a little parking garage, something they can walk into. So you have like heat both at the top and at the bottom. I mean, we're already doing similar things like that. But where it's could be in the shape of a rock, could be in the shape of a little termite mound or whatnot. But like the lizard can walk into it, get heated up to where it essentially it just needs to get heated up. It can accomplish some of these same things other places. Now, outside of the animals that might need UV for whatever reason and getting that in conjunction with heat, that might be a little different. But talking for monitor related stuff, where it can just get that heat that it needs, I don't know. There might be some other things that we can try and try to accomplish through, I guess, new technology or bringing back old stuff and just doing it better. So
That's kind of what you reminded me of. What Ron St. Pierre does. I saw on one of those videos. It's like the thing where, remember, he put the plastic greenhouse paneling inside of that basking area, right? So because his laces couldn't get to that high temps that they needed, so the sun came through that and it made an oven basically to that 150. That's very similar to what you said. I think that could be applicable as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, man, you kind of got to think outside the box a little bit, even with the design, right? And so, a black, like, let's say if I used like the setting that I was talking about earlier, the power sun and the floodlight next to each other. If I put a black piece of slate underneath that power sun or that mega ray, I'm pretty sure it'll help get it up there, But on wood, I'm usually mostly using wood because my mangroves, they don't like to bask underneath blistering hot stuff. No. They're like a cool jungle shadow basker, That's the type of basking elements that they like. So, yeah, man, think outside the box. Like I've seen guys that basically have like the outdoor stuff. I've seen them spray paint a piece of plywood black and just set it there, and the sun will make that thing much hotter than the square footage around it, And you just got to think, man. I think I forget his name. I think it's Bert Lang, the gentleman that died that used to breed the tegus, right? Dude, if we actually went into his brain, or he had like a book of photos, and he uses the most weirdest things that you could just stuff around your house, bro. Like you guys didn't grow up with him, and we got to see the end of him. But man, during his primes and stuff, and what he would utilize, he'd use like black rugs and like just tin cans,
scientists, MacGyver stuff.
Literally MacGyver, anything, right? And so you got to go back. I understand the hobby has it's grown. We make our backgrounds now, and all those other things that are evolving, right? But dang, sometimes we just got to take it back to all crazy, regular, things that may not make sense to people. It just makes sense, It might look stupid, but if it works, it's not stupid,
And a nice looking enclosure is only good if it's functional. You can have an enclosure that's functional and it doesn't look naturalistic, and it still works just as good as one that's naturalistic and functional. But if it's just naturalistic, it's useless to the animal, right?
Yeah.
You got a nice looking enclosure that's 60 degrees all around. There you go. So.
All right. Yep. Okay. You got any more questions, brother? It was a really great podcast.
That's about it right now, man. I appreciate you guys for all the info. You guys are two wealths of knowledge for sure, man.
Okay.
We go back to the drawing board all the time, though. We're like, wait, what did I do? What did But
hopefully in another year I can come back on having some more breeding experience and kind of we could talk again about what's worked, what hasn't. So
yeah, man, we'd love to have you back on for round 2, even your enclosure build. If you feel like you want to come on and there's some stuff that, will like to reach the audience and to show the people getting into it, man, it doesn't have to be after you breed at all. As long as there's a topic, it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, man.
All right, man. To get to the last part and Alan, this is what we kind of talked about yesterday. Will as well. This is off topic to what we're doing, but it's still regarding, monitors, or it's regarding keepers in general. And this is kind of a whole 180 switch on what we're doing as far as topics go. But Will is one of the, I would say, younger generation leaders, as far as what he does. He's getting into the YouTube world and more into monitors. And it's not to say that he's like the leader or something like that, but
no,
we all are in some way or another contributing to the younger generation coming up. Even Alan, even guys that have been around for a long time. Like like John or something like that. We want to nurture the young crew coming up because, some of the things that have been going on in the groups and through people, just maybe their egos or whatever. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of drama in groups, and with a lot of money involved, with a lot of expensive animals and pride and power, whatever you want to consider, people trip about. They are, and when it comes down to, like us, me and Alan working with, I didn't know Will was 19 years old, but, we're trying to nurture the younger generation, even if they were 5 or 7 years old or 10 years old. We want to make sure that we're grasping them in a way where they're not seeing this bad behavior as okay. I don't want to see people fighting or, being so egotistical with knowledge and fame or whatever. As far as we go, we kind of need to work together because we're all kind of all we have. And now to speak specifically about monitors, we wouldn't be here without people like John willing to help all of us.
Right.
People like Dave Kirshner willing to help all of us. People like Mike Stefani doing things for all of us. So for us to take what they've done and then kind of claim it as our own, and then, either hoard information or choose sides or create little cliques and then not work with those guys, or I try to work with everybody, and to take me, for example, and let's say Aubrey, right? Because people have already tried to pin us against each other when we're actually on the same team, if
Right.
we don't bounce information off of each other, the coli may not have gotten where it has gotten this year. If it wasn't him messaging me and me messaging him for information, even if he's looking up to me, I'm still asking him for information. Hey, what are you implementing? How can it help me? What are you doing? How can that help me? It's things like that. If I were to be egotistical about the coli and being like, hey, I'm the only guy doing them, and not work with Aubrey or not work with other people that are in the Indicus world, the Indicus world will stay the freaking same. It would be nobody breeding anything, nobody hatching anything, nobody getting from scared, frantic imports that are basically disregarded because of their natural behaviors. They'd get nowhere. But look at us now, me and Alan and a few other members, we're in this big chat, and it's got members from Denmark, Canada, all over the United States. And we work together and we bounce ideas, and it's no longer just 2 people, it's now 25 people that are throwing information out there.
Yeah.
What can work for me can possibly work for you. Try it. We have zookeepers and regular novice all in the same group. And, for us to work together and try to grow from what we saw monitors like 10 years ago to now, I think 2023 is probably one of the best years for monitors.
Absolutely.
I mean, you got to look at it. Like Crocs, Doomerals, all types of tree monitors, the coli that me and Aubrey have been able to do, a Ham Spencer, things that were dreams before now are actually being done because people are working together.
Right.
So with the drama, like I don't want to name names or, people know who they are and what they may be doing. I really recommend, just trying to work together, trying to drop some of the ego and just leave that at the door. Because at the end of the day, it's about the animals. It's about, if you really cared for the animal, you would really try to go the extra distance, even if you didn't like that person or you didn't agree with what they're doing, or, maybe you guys bump heads or whatever. The animals progress nowhere if you guys aren't trying to work together. And so, it might make you a better human being when you realize, hey, like, I shouldn't have treated him like that. We could try to be a team rather than working against each other. And so if you're bumping heads with this person, how does that help the animals in turn? How does that help these people in turn? It really doesn't, and the bashing and things like that I see in groups, I try to avoid it. It's like you looking on the internet and you decided to step in poop. I can choose not to. I can choose not to, and you can do the same. It's where, you try not to throw words back and forth and make a fool out of yourself on the internet when these younger generations are looking at you. Then they'll see that this is okay when it's not. And we're trying to get somewhere further for monitors, period. We're not done yet. There's still a whole lot of species to be bred.
Yeah.
There's still Dumerals. There's still Dorianas to be bred, tricolors to be bred. Roughnecks to do better.
Grays, gold spotted.
So many species that we can. Now we're implementing more things. Like even the simplest import, like Nile monitors, there needs to be some type of sufficient ground for people that want to breed those. And they can't just be written off as $5 imports because that's what they come in as. You buy 1,000, they're $5, because people are selling them for $25, $30. How much do you think they got them for? And me and Alan, we've talked about this a lot. Niles are one of the prettiest monitors that are out there.
Absolutely.
They're one of the beautiful. But they're so disregarded because they're cheap, and they may have a temper, but my Indicus have one too. And you have to get people to love these things. Like, essentially care about them enough to go the extra mile, to put in the effort, even if you make no money, even if you break even, even if you go broke and go crazy, losing your mind trying to figure them out. They need that effort. And so I want to kind of end this podcast, with hopefully people that do listen to this understand that the drama, it needs to stop, or you need to keep it cordial at the very least, and keep it off of the groups where, the younger generation growing up, I don't want them to see like clicking up and working together, but then these guys suffer. Those guys that suffer, so do their animals. So does monitors in general. And if we love monitors like we say we do, this is what you'd be doing.
Right. And just to touch on that, I don't involve myself, and I don't go looking for a lot of the stuff like Kai said. I stay out of it, and I just never even click on it to begin with. So I'm oblivious to a lot of even the stuff probably Kai's referencing at the moment. And if somebody hits me up, I don't know what your backstory is unless something big went down or whatever, that you made the regular news. I don't know who you are, but I'll try to help out. But as far as, the competition with things, I don't know if it's business or ego or whatnot out there, but somebody told me when I first started getting back into it, there's enough room at the table for everybody. All right. There's plenty of room. There's plenty to do from a business standpoint for people out there. Reptiles is not a successful business model for most people. All right.
No.
And if you're not at the top, if you don't get in at the beginning and you don't know how to do it, there's so many things. If you have the experience, you probably spent all your money getting there. Okay. So you don't have any more money. If you have the money, then you probably haven't wasted it all on reptiles anyway. So you're missing the experience. So, but the guys that have both the experience and the money are few and far between to bring in like a new product, you would say. And by a product, I mean a new animal. And to do that thing successfully and to get it to the point where in the first, let's say 5-10 years, they can actually be successful and make some money with that animal. All right. But you got to realize at some point, if you're successful, you're producing this thing, other people are going to get a hold of it. That's your business plan, is to sell to them. And then at that point, they're going to hopefully be successful with the same thing. So, if more people start breeding Kimberly rocks and being successful, if we can really figure out across the U.S. how to hatch them consistently, the price of them should come down to whatever, maybe an Aki is, or an Aki should come down, because there's a lot of people that people that I've sold to, people that have listened to this podcast, they're now being very successful with Akis. So if there's a lot more breeders out there, then naturally the price has to come down. So I see people get hung up and people fighting about prices on things. It's like, hey, when there's a lot of a product, when there's a lot of a product, the price has to come down. There's other places.
Supply and demand, homie.
Right.
Yeah, and you have to accept that. You have to accept that. I think some people are like, hey, this guy's doing it, and now I have competition. I'm just going to bail. I mean, you can bail, but are you scared of a little competition? That just means you got to work a little harder. You got to charge a little bit differently, or go above and beyond to provide more than just the animal. You're providing service. You're providing, knowledge. You're not only providing excellent help, but, you've then become a friend to these people. They're not just a customer. You then, if you purchase something that I worked blood, sweat, and tears for, literally going crazy where I'm like burning out, if you buy one of those at whatever I charged you, you then become technically family to me. You become someone that, oh man, like, hey buddy, like how's it going? It's not just here, buy it and you go your way and I'm going my way. It gets to that point where I put in so much work to this. When you're buying it, and for me, these things got me out of the gutter, so if you're paying for my business that helped me get out of the worst situations in life, man, I see it more than that. I see it as, now this, but again, like Alan was saying, it's just competition and how it is with anything. It can be court to lizards. So, I just want you guys to work together. We can literally run the world together with how these monitors are going, and it doesn't get easier. We just get better.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the next task is quite difficult if you consider Dorianus and tricolors as the next task, but we then become better at the knowledge that we've attained, and then how we're going to then implement it into our practices. Yeah. So.
And I will say, just for the younger generation of people who we see the monitor game, the reptile game, but especially the monitor game evolving in the ways that we keep. But some of the younger guys, myself included, I'm guilty of this too, but I've since changed my mindset. Sometimes you'll see or you'll feel unaccepted to a certain group, or you'll feel like people are holding information away. And then you'll tend to like take this stance of, oh, we don't need the OGs, or we don't need these people who have done it before me because they don't want to help me. I can do it by myself. And I just want to encourage all the younger guys, that's not the right way to go about it. Or even if you don't agree with the way that someone does something, it's not right to hold that against them and to not take anything. Because even the people who you may not agree with their husbandry practices, they may still be producing animals and have healthy animals. There's still some good that you can garner from them, and there's still a lot of information that you can learn. So I just want to kind of send a message like, guys, let's try to not make enemies in this whole thing. Let's try not to bash heads, try not to be in competition with one another, but more so let's try to, just like Kai and Alan said, work together. And we're doing this for the animals at the end, guys, whether you're in, the US like us, whether you're in Canada, in Australia, in South America and Africa, in the UK, shout out my guy Paul, but like anywhere, guys, we're all doing this on a global stage together. There's no bad that can come out of us working together, but there is a lot of bad that can come out of it if we decide to recluse and click up and stuff. So that's all.
And yeah, man. So it was a great podcast, man.
Really man. It was
Alan,
a lot of fun.
Anything else, brother? No?
I don't think so. I think we can wrap it up there. I could go on with stories and stories, but
yeah, man. No, it was amazing. It was amazing. I'm really glad that we're able to work this out, Will.
For sure, guys.
probably one of the dopest podcasts, I think, with so many messages in this one.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, man, I see how things are erupting, and even if I grew up that way of clicking up and fighting with other people and things like that. I don't want that in my future. I don't want that in what what I'm trying to show the younger generation, because they look up to me like I'm like something crazy. I'm just a regular guy trying to breed monitors and keep the peace as much as possible. I
don't say this stuff from a condemning standpoint. I say this from a standpoint of this is how my mindset was, and I've realized that it's not the way to be, guys. Yeah. It's really not. We can all work together, and it'll just be so much better. We'll have more success. Who doesn't want more success with breeding our favorite animals in the entire world? You know what I mean? Right. We get to wake up every day and see our favorite species that we dreamed of when we were kids, and then we want to take that and be like, oh, I'm not going to share this with you. When, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But I will say this, for those guys that do want that edge above the competition, go ahead and buy your grasshoppers from Kai, because that's going to do
shameless plug.
Everybody loves grasshoppers now. But yeah, and like I'll say this myself, man, it's not even about the grasshoppers. I've seen people do it without it. It's just I just introduced a different feeder than you using mice. So, it's something different. Oh,
man, I was just throwing that in there to have some fun with the people.
It's the wings, man. It's the wings. I will say, when I first got my Pilbara, it wouldn't eat anything for like a month or 2 months, and I was getting worried. Dude, I threw it a grasshopper, and it clicked. It was a mix of the grasshopper and a deep heat projector that just turned it on. And the wings fluttering, man, it's...
the imported tree monitors, the Parsoni, horned lizards, so many fresh imported stuff. People, they come to me, they ask for the grasshoppers, and bam, in months their animals never eaten, but once the grasshoppers were introduced, they saw the lizard light up.
And so much of those animals you named are canopy dwelling animals, right? And we've been trying to feed them ground dwelling feeders. Like a tree monitor or a chameleon, they've probably never seen a roach or a grub in their life. What do they see? They see stick bugs, grasshoppers, and katydids. So when you give them that, in their mind, it snaps. It snaps, and they're able to go.
And it's just now, that's how we think. It's how, as much as we love the captive, manipulations that we've been doing with what we have available, man, we still have to take from the wild. We still have to incorporate what the wild is doing and then put it in our box.
Because they do it the best.
Yeah,
they do it the best.
Nothing beats the wild,
Yep.
All right, man. Hey, it was great to have you on, brother.
Yes, sir.
Alan,
Thank you, guys.
Where can they find you, man?
Well, they can find me, of course, Origins Reptile on Facebook and Origins_Reptile on Instagram. You can hit me up by Messenger. If you try to friend me under just Alan Stevens, I'm real selective about just making that like the family and friends locally for the most part. There is a few reptile people, but there's usually some history behind it, for whatnot. So don't get offended. Just you can always message me on something. I keep that for my sanity too, because if I don't, then everything would be reptiles, and I try to keep that separation in life just for my family's sake, for my own sake, for things. So find me on either one of those first two mentioned, and or reach out, and I'll get better soon once everything's done and moved in about getting back to people on a more consistent basis as well, because this has been taking up a lot of time. But that's where you can find me. Will, what about you, man?
Instagram, Mr. Will Exotic, or you can watch my YouTube videos at Will Exotic if you like monitor-related content, listening to me ramble about my favorite lizards in the world.
So, that's it. You on Facebook as well, or not really?
No, I'm perpetually on Facebook. Unfortunately, mostly just learning from you guys and the tree monitor groups. But if you guys have questions about different monitors, I'll try my best to answer them. But I will also gladly refer you guys to people who are more knowledgeable than me if I can. So,
Kai, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram under big_lizard103. But even though I'm on Instagram a little bit every day, I'm on Facebook a lot more and much more responsive on Facebook. So you can find me under Just Kai Fan. But you can also find me at a couple other places as well, like on YouTube, things like that.
I said you can find me in the lab. He said you can find me in the lab.
You can find me busy working, man. All right, Alan, you want to close this out, brother?
Yeah. Again, we're brought to you by the umbrella, I would say, of Morelia Python Radio Network. Eric's a great guy. Owen, great guy. If you're not familiar with what we're talking about, just do a word search for it. You're going to get linked up with not only the original podcast, Morelia Python Radio, but all of the other podcasts that they now have. There's at least 10. I haven't even counted in a while. There's probably more, covering almost every topic out there. And then you can also seek out information on there. You can email Morelia Python Radio. You can follow their Facebook and Instagram. There's a lot of great information. They do a calendar contest for a lot of the carpet pythons. There's carpet fests all over the U.S. if you're into carpet pythons, like everyone should be, because they're awesome. But just do yourself a favor, go on there, look it up. Even on their original show, they had multiple guests. Some going back as far as 10 years ago, with different different monitor keepers, sharing some really cool information on there. So there's a lot to learn from some of these old school keepers and the way they would do things. Or we say old school, but this is just the way they would get things done, and incorporating that, and maybe it'll spur you on a new idea. So I encourage you to go back and listen to all that stuff. You can just soak yourself in it. So there's that much content out there. So give it a listen. All right, guys, I think we should wrap it up.
All right, boys.
All right.
Thank you guys for the invite, man.
All right, man. Well, thanks, man. Have a good one.
Sir.